There's something no one told you about this person who's distancing themselves from you. It's not indifference, it's survival. You must have spent nights trying to understand what you did wrong, going through conversations, searching for the phrase, the gesture, the mistake that made someone so present become absent. But what if the problem was never what you did, but rather who you are, without even realizing it, simply by existing in your Scorpio way of existing? There's a kind of closeness that bothers those who aren't ready to be truly seen. And that's exactly what you do. Even silently, even without any intention. You look and the person feels they've been seen. You remain silent, and that silence weighs more than any words. It's not seduction, it's presence. It's that kind of energy that exposes layers the person has spent their whole life hiding, even from themselves. Anyone who truly lives with a Scorpio quickly discovers that you can't pretend for long. The masks fall, the excuses become clear, the pretty speeches sound hollow. And some people can't stand this reflection. Not because you demanded it, but because simply being near you demands a truth that the person doesn't have the courage to face. Think of someone you met, who arrived full of promise, saying they'd never felt anything like it, that they'd finally found someone real. And little by little, for no stated reason, that same person began shrinking the conversations, postponing meetings, exchanging depth for distant politeness. You noticed before you admitted it. You felt the change in temperature even before it turned into total silence. And you stayed there, wondering what you had done, when in reality you had done nothing but remain whole. This happens because being close to you isn't comfortable. It's revealing. Being near a Scorpio is like being under a bright light in a room where you've always hidden in the shadows. Suddenly, insecurities become visible. The emotional disguises the person used with everyone else, with you, simply no longer work. And that's unbearable for someone who never learned to exist without a mask. Then she backs away. She gradually withdraws. Or all at once. She disappears, cools off, creates distance where there was once intimacy. She replaces, "I want to really get to know you," with, "Let's see how things go," which is the polite way of saying that the courage has run out, and you're left there thinking you did something, when in reality you just continued being yourself. Intense, present, hard to deceive. And that, for certain people, is unbearable, because it demands a truth from them that they never had the courage to face alone. Have you ever heard someone say you're too much? Too much in your questions, your gaze, your uncompromising way of loving? And for a long time, you may have believed you needed to adjust, shrink a little here, soften there, just to fit into the space others could offer without panicking. But no one ever told you that maybe size was never the problem. The problem was the space that was too small for you that they tried to offer. Some people approach out of curiosity, drawn precisely by this intensity, like someone approaching a fire on a cold night. They stay there, warming themselves, admiring the flame from afar. But when the heat demands more than they were prepared to give, they recoil, afraid of getting burned. It's not the fire's fault for being a fire. It's the limit of those who never knew how to be near a flame without trying to extinguish it. But why exactly does this intensity bother so much those who don't have their own emotional foundation to support their own weight? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. While trying to understand why certain people simply can't stand being around me, I stumbled upon The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It's not a generic self-help manual. It's more of a mindset, the idea that you don't need to shrink yourself to fit into the superficiality of those who are afraid of depth. For Scorpio, this is instinctive, because you already know, deep down, that you weren't born to live on the surface of things. If you've made it this far, you're probably still recognizing some scene, some face, some person who disappeared without explanation. That discomfort you're still experiencing now, as you listen to this, is precisely a sign that there's something to understand better about your own intensity before you continue blaming yourself for the magnitude of who you are. It's not about becoming a different person, easier to digest, easier to let go of without guilt. It's about finally understanding that whoever distanced themselves never had the structure to sustain what you truly offered, and that this never needed to be corrected in you. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Leave a comment. Has anyone ever disappeared from your life without ever giving you a real explanation? The first thing you need to understand is that Scorpios don't push people away by accident. It's an almost automatic self-protection mechanism. Think of a safe door. It doesn't close because it hates whoever is outside. It closes because it was designed to protect what's valuable inside. You do that with your feelings. You test before you give. You observe before you trust. And whoever comes wanting shortcuts, without patience for this process, runs into a wall that seems cold, but is actually armor. The problem is that this test is silent. You don't announce that you're testing. The person only senses that suddenly something has changed, that it's become harder to reach you, and they don't understand why. They back away thinking they did something wrong. But most of the time, they simply failed the test they didn't even know they were taking. And there's a part of it that almost no one admits. You also observe the person's reaction to the test itself. It's not malice. It's an instinct for emotional survival, refined over past disappointments. You notice when someone insists on superficiality, even after several attempts to delve deeper. You notice when beautiful speeches aren't accompanied by coherent actions. And you file that away, silently, in a part of yourself that you never forget. This doesn't make you calculating. It makes you someone who has learned, through experience, that promises without substance are just pretty noise. And pretty noise, however seductive it may be at first, never survives the test of time with a Scorpio. But what happens to those who actually get past this protection and still choose to leave afterwards? Some people enter, see what's behind the shield, and run away precisely because of that. Because they discover that its intensity isn't a phase, it isn't a facade, it's a structure. And living with a deep structure takes work. It demands real presence, not occasional visits. Imagine a deep pool compared to a shallow one. In the shallow one, anyone can get in, play a little, and get out without even getting their hair properly wet. In the deep one, you need to know how to swim. You need breath control. You need the courage to not see the bottom. Many people approach you thinking it's a shallow pool, and when they realize the real depth, they panic. Not because you did something wrong, but because their emotional resilience has never been trained for that. This happens more often than you think. The person arrives fascinated by your genuine way of loving, by your ability to look them in the eye and say truths that no one else dares to say. They find it beautiful, romanticize it, even post about it to their friends. But when that same intensity demands real reciprocity, constant emotional presence, they discover that admiring from afar is much easier than sustaining it up close. And then it disappears. Or worse, it stays but emotionally absent, occupying physical space without ever delivering any depth. It becomes superficial company, the loneliest type of relationship there is, because you know exactly what's missing there. And here comes the uncomfortable question. How many of these outings, physical or emotional, did you carry as if they were your fault, when in reality, they were someone else's limits? This question hurts because it touches on an old wound, the idea that intensity is a flaw that needs correction. It was thinking about this that I returned to the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. There, Scorpio's depth isn't treated as excess, It's treated as direction, as a compass for those who are tired of limiting themselves just so others can cope with their own discomfort. The last copies are running out, and this content may be taken down at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's another side to this that almost no one talks about. Sometimes it's not the other person who runs away from you. It's you who pushes them away first, without realizing it. Because deep down, getting too close to someone means giving them access to parts of yourself that you're still learning to manage. And then, before the person gets close enough to see what you don't want to show, you've already created distance. It's like closing the curtains at home before anyone even knocks on the door. No one asked you to hide, but the possibility of exposure was enough to trigger your instinct. And the most curious thing is that this curtain doesn't just close on strangers. Sometimes it closes right when someone important starts to get really close, exactly when things get good enough that it would hurt if things went wrong. Self-protection doesn't choose the most convenient moment. It acts before reason can argue against it. You've probably noticed this before. The silence that appears just when someone says something too beautiful. The curt response that comes out when someone offers affection that you don't know where to put. It's not coldness. It's the emotional body trying, in the old-fashioned way, to avoid a pain it has felt before and doesn't want to repeat. So who really pushes whom away in this whole story? The person who disappears, or the part of you that already knew it would disappear too if things got too serious? This pattern comes from somewhere. No one is born distrustful of closeness by chance. There's usually a history there, a time when opening up too much came at a high price, and the emotional body learns quickly. If it hurt that much once, it's best never to make things so easy again. It's like an overly sensitive car alarm. It was calibrated after a real robbery, so now it goes off even in strong winds. It protects, but it also overreacts. And people who get close to you feel this alarm, even without knowing its origin. Some have the patience to understand that the alarm exists for a reason, others don't. Think about how many times you've reacted with distance to someone who, in reality, hadn't done anything similar to what hurt you before. Emotional memory can't make that distinction on its own. It generalizes. It senses a similar situation and triggers the same mechanism, even if the person in front of you is completely different from the one who caused the original pain. This isn't a character flaw. It's emotional biology, trying to protect what's already been hurt too much once. But without recognizing this pattern, you end up pushing good people away because of a ghost that has nothing to do with the present. What if the real work isn't turning off the alarm, but learning to recognize when it's merely repeating a danger that has already passed? Recognizing this changes everything, because it means stopping treating your intensity as a problem to be solved and starting to treat it as energy to be consciously channeled. It was exactly this kind of turning point that I found in The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, designed for those who feel too much and have never had a real roadmap to transform that into strength. This material may be taken down at any time, and the last copies are running out. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Now think of someone specific, someone who came on strong, promised to stay, swore they could handle your depth, and then after a while started avoiding serious topics, cutting conversations short, disappearing at times that would have been natural for the two of you before. This is no coincidence. It's a behavioral pattern. Some people fall in love with the idea of Scorpio's intensity without understanding its true cost. They find it beautiful from afar, like watching a storm through the window. But when the storm enters their home, they quickly change their minds. It almost always starts like this. Total fascination, generous verbal devotion, promises that this was different from anything they had ever experienced before. And you, even though you're naturally suspicious, allow a little hope to creep in, because deep down, you also want to believe that someone will have enough stamina to stay. But endurance isn't proven with words. It's proven with time and presence during difficult moments, precisely where most fail. And when the time comes to uphold what was promised, when intensity ceases to be the charm of the beginning of a relationship and becomes real coexistence with conflict, heavy silences, and uncomfortable truths, that's when the mask of courage falls. And what's left for you after the person who swore to stay decides they would have preferred to just watch from afar? What remains is a feeling of silent betrayal, without a fight, without an argument, just a growing absence. And that hurts in a different way because there's no clear enemy to blame. The person didn't do anything wrong on paper, they just stopped being present. But gradual absence is also a choice, only disguised as tiredness, a hectic pace of life. It's like a plant that gradually stops being watered. No one decides to kill it overnight. They just stop paying attention until one day it no longer has the strength to react. A relationship with a Scorpio requires constant nurturing, real presence, not sporadic visits of convenience. The worst part about this kind of gradual absence is that it always comes disguised as a reasonable explanation. I have a lot on my mind. I need some time for myself. It's not you, it's me. And each of these phrases in isolation might even be true. But together, forming a pattern that repeats itself every time the relationship demands real depth, they tell a different story. That of someone who never intended to nurture what they planted. You feel it before you can name it. You feel it in your body, in the tightness in your chest, in the intuition that screams while your mouth is still trying to excuse the person. And it takes time, sometimes months, until you stop justifying what you already knew from the beginning. But what happens when it's precisely this same root of intensity that teaches you to identify those who never intended to truly nurture anything? This clarity, this ability to see early on who has no roots to stay, is one of the most valuable things that Scorpio's depth offers, even if it hurts in the process. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose works precisely on this capacity for emotional reading as a gift, not a curse, teaching you to use your perception to your advantage without closing yourself off from the world. Since this content may be taken down and the last copies are running out, the time to act is now. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Perhaps the hardest truth to swallow is this: not everyone who gets close to you deserves to stay close, and that's okay. Your intensity isn't meant to be tamed to fit the size of someone afraid of depth. It exists to naturally filter out those who have the emotional strength to sustain a real connection with you. Think of a sieve. It doesn't judge what passes through it. It only lets through what is fine enough and retains what is too coarse to pass through. You are a sieve, not out of malice, but by nature. And every person who can't stand being near you is only revealing their own size, not yours. And understanding this completely changes how you look at your own losses. Because that person who disappeared, that love that cooled without warning, that friendship that dissolved in silence, were never exactly losses. They were revelations. Each separation showed you with painful clarity who had the strength to stay and who only had the words to start. This doesn't eliminate the pain of being left, but it changes its meaning. You stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking, what did this person lack to sustain what I offered? And this change in question alone is already a kind of healing. So, if your intensity is a filter, what changes when you stop blaming yourself for what it reveals in others? Everything changes, because you stop wasting energy trying to shrink yourself to be tolerable and start using that same energy to recognize, faster and faster, who truly has the emotional roots to stay. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you precise. And precision for someone who has already been hurt trying to fit into the wrong size of the wrong people is a relief, not a hardening. Someone who can't stand being near you never truly rejected you. It was a mirror they didn't have the courage to face, and every time someone like that walks away, deep down, it's opening up space for someone who truly has the strength to swim in your depths without drowning in them. Look back at each person who disappeared, each silence that hurt, each explanation that never came. And instead of reliving the pain, try to see what it revealed. Each absence was a filter doing exactly what it should do, separating those who had roots from those who only had a fleeting desire to admire the fire from afar. You didn't lose these people. You discovered sooner than you would have otherwise that they never had the structure to stay. This doesn't mean hardening your heart or ceasing to open up. It means opening up with discernment, knowing that not every outburst is your fault and that your depth never needed an excuse to exist. You don't need to be lighter to be loved properly. You just need to continue being exactly that intensity that scares the shallow and enchants those with true roots. There's someone out there with that kind of background, someone with a breath trained for depth, who won't back down from who you are. And when that person arrives, they won't run from the depths. They'll dive in on purpose, without any fear of getting completely wet, because they'll finally recognize that what others called too much was, in fact, exactly the right amount.